Welcome to everybody, any of our guests or folks who are joining us for the first time. It's good to see you. And I have a confession today. I've got a lot of material today, and I really hate to give a long and boring sermon, so I may not even go through all the slides. So I like to have it as kind of a discussion, and hopefully the stuff that we talk about today is stuff that you can relate to. The first thing I wanted to talk about was, I've mentioned this a few times. I know that several of you, just from conversations, are fans of The Big Bang Theory, the sitcom. And I know some of you don't really care for it, or I don't pretend that it has the greatest values. I mean, I don't think, most sitcoms or TV shows have the greatest values at all. So in no way do my comments serve as an endorsement for what's portrayed in the show. However, having said all of that legal mumbo jumbo, one of the most beloved characters on that show is named Sheldon. If you haven't seen it, he is this very regimented, very scheduled, very routine-oriented and driven characters. And there's a lot of other adjectives you can come up with, but I'm going to leave it there. He's a bit of a cartoon character of those traits, in the sense that he makes his roommates abide by a bathroom schedule. And so in the mornings, it's like the bathroom is yours for shower and shaving and whatever from 6:10 to 6:40. And then, at the next time, it's for the next person. And it's all so scheduled and routine. And one of his friends came, met him up in the laundry room, and she put all of her clothes in all of the washers and dryers so that he couldn't do anything on his laundry day. And so he came there ready to do laundry because it was laundry day. And I think it was Thursday or Saturday or whatever. And so his friend who was tormenting him said, "Oh my goodness, I guess you can't do laundry today." And so he said, "Well, that doesn't matter, I'll just do it another day." And she says, "Yeah, but in your heart, you know that Saturday is always laundry day." So it was going to drive him nuts that he couldn't do laundry on that day. And what's funny is that that's the kind of cartoonish representation of living life that I just can't stand. I mean, I don't like that level of schedule and routine. And I know I wouldn't fit in well with the military, right? So it's a good thing I haven't been through it. I know that's a big part of your indoctrination through boot camp. So that being said, it's come to my attention recently. I like to study habits of effectiveness and productivity. And it's come to my attention recently that, not yet, it's come to my attention recently that no matter what we do, no matter how much we might fight against routine and habit, the truth is each of us has a routine. And no matter how effective it is, we still have some kind of habit or routine or way of doing things. And so, for example, in the morning, I like to mix things up. It's like maybe I brush my teeth first, maybe I do this first, maybe I do that first. And it's just like, I don't even like doing that in the same order. I just like to mix everything up. And so it's kind of funny, though, because that's still a routine. That's still a habit. It's maybe I just kind of play with the order, but it's still a routine. And it's interesting that as Christians, as church-going people, we get into habits and routines and schedules, and we don't even realize it. I found out recently that there are churches that see themselves as non-liturgical. And it's funny, I've heard the same comment from several people. The idea of a non-liturgical church is kind of crazy because they generally don't exist. Now, a liturgy is a way of worship. It's a schedule or an order of services. And so you could talk to someone who says, "Oh, we're not liturgical at all." And then you could say, "Okay, well, what are services like for you?" "Well, we get together, we sing a song, and then we go and we collect an offering, and then we have a message, and then we sing another song, and then we do announcements, and then a benediction, and then we leave." Well, that's a liturgy. That's an order of service. So you may say you're not liturgical, and yet you just prove that you are. And I used to be that way. I used to say, I am not a liturgical person. But what I was talking about is kind of a Sheldon-esque approach to church. I didn't like, if doing communion in a certain way that the napkin goes in the middle, and then I fold it in half, and then in half again. Then I place it on the lower right corner, and then I take the tops off of the bread. I'd stack them carefully, place them behind me in a certain way. I mean, I've seen it done that way before, and that's fine. It's just not me. I don't like a Sheldon approach to life. However, that is a cartoon, and that is an extreme. And the funny thing is, we do have a way we do things. Whatever you schedule, we have our birthday and anniversary celebrations on the first weekend of the month. And then we do communion on the second and fourth. And that's the way we do things. But what's funny is that it becomes kind of a reverse of the way things ought to be, in that we take our traditions, we take our patterns, and then we kind of imprint them into the Bible and onto what we think God wants, when it's really just our customs. It's really just what we've developed over time, especially things we've done for decades. And then when something else comes along that doesn't match that pattern, look out, because then you've got real problems. And what's funny is that it really depends on your church tradition, because as Protestants, most of us have grown up in a church culture where we do not do what Catholics do. We don't do what Episcopals do. We don't do what the Baptists do necessarily. It's just, Protestants, and many of them are Protestants as well, Baptists, of course, Anglicans, kind of in between. But the point being, you've got different traditions, and we tend to not like, well, that's not the way we do it. So with that introduction, I do want to talk about the season it is in the church calendar and whether or not it's relevant to us as Protestants. I'm sure you've heard of Lent and the practice, and you've seen people with the smudge of ashes on their forehead, and probably like me, you think, well, that's for Catholics, that's not for us. And it's funny because I'm nervous even talking about it, because I remember 2.5 years ago when I started talking about liturgy, someone said to me afterward, "You're not going to make us Catholic, are you, Steve?" And I said, well, no, that's not the intent at all. I just wanted to talk about different modes of worship, and I wanted to talk about the church calendar. And it's really interesting that some of the things that we think are the right ways to worship really are just tradition, and we're missing out on other parts of tradition that may have just been outside of our sphere of experience. Now, my point today is not to say, okay, we are all going to do 40 days of Lent, but rather, as Protestants who may not be as experienced with it, let's take a look at it and say, okay, what's the big deal? What's it about? Where did it come from? And is it something we should participate in? So I want to take a look at a few different scriptures. I'm going to we talked about our habits and our routines, the order of service. Those different practices, whether it be a certain way of doing communion, or it be a certain way of praying, or doing responsive readings or scripture readings, those all serve as reminders of Christ. And same with communion. And what happened was they helped develop a Christian calendar. So as Christianity was developing over the centuries, a calendar developed that said, why don't we focus on this part of Jesus' life now? And then a few weeks or a few months later, we'll focus on this part of Jesus' life. And it kind of followed loosely the ministry and the life of Jesus. So this calendar developed that was part of major Christendom, or the Catholic Church in the sense of the small c, meaning the universal all Christian believers. And it kind of started off a little bit with Christmas and Easter. Well, those are two of the huge events for the Christian calendar, right? We're talking about Jesus' birth, death, and resurrection. And so those are kind of like tent poles. And then, well, what do you do before and after those events? What happens in between? Because we want to celebrate Christ and worship him other than just Christmas and Easter. So other seasons were developed, other practices were developed. And in part, baptism played into this, because it used to be that the season leading up to Easter would often be a time of preparation for new believers. to get baptized on Easter, and they'd spend several weeks learning about the Christian walk. So baptism kind of figured into this at some point too. So the Christian calendar was developed, and I know I've shown you this picture before. We'll zoom in a minute, but it just kind of, it's this cycle. So you've got Advent, or the coming of Jesus, and then you've got the Epiphany, which is actually a celebration of 3 different events. We might get into that later. The season of Lent, which is this part of year that we're approaching, and then Easter, and then the season after Pentecost, and then creation, and then the season after Pentecost continues, and it's this cycle. And so out of that came the lectionary, which means let's look at these scriptures throughout the year. So it's a cycle of worship. Right now here, today is actually Transfiguration Sunday, which is a commemoration of when Jesus was transfigured on the mountain with a few of the disciples, and his clothes turned white, and Moses and Elijah showed up, and the disciples were kind of confused. I almost brought a video clip of that, but we don't want to focus so much on Transfiguration Sunday, but it leads up to Ash Wednesday, which is this Wednesday. And the ashes of the palm branches that were burned are then put on people's foreheads in symbolism. And it leads into Lent, and then leads up to Holy Week. Now, see, it's kind of funny because sometimes we as Protestants are like, oh, we don't do Lent. Oh, but you do Holy Week. You do Maundy, Thursday, and Easter. Okay. Well, it's kind of a buffet then, isn't it? It's like, well, I want the chicken, I don't want the beef, So it's just like, okay, there's this whole smorgasbord, and you just pick out what you like. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I'm just exposing us to the idea that there are other things out there, and Lent is just as valid and has some opportunities for worship as well. I want to give just a little bit of a history here. Lent comes from an English word, stems from the Anglo-Saxon for spring, and related to the English word lengthen, that refers to the penitential period preceding Easter. And penitence being, mournful, I'm sorry. Penance is kind of doing your own punishment and regret for sins. So it refers to the penitential period preceding Easter. Early Christians felt that the magnitude of the Easter celebration called for special preparation. As early as the 2nd century, many Christians observed several days of fasting as part of that preparation. Over the next few centuries, perhaps in remembrance of Jesus fasting for 40 days in the wilderness, 40 days became the accepted length of the Lenten season. So you know how Jesus was tempted in the desert. Satan said, turn these stones into bread and throw yourself off the Temple Mount and, worship me and I'll give you everything. And no, Jesus said no to all of it. And Jesus had to fast for 40 days to even be weakened to the point where Satan might even tempt him. So it's an interesting period, and then Lent kind of possibly grew from that period. So ever since, from the earliest years of Christianity, it had been considered inappropriate to fast on the day of the resurrection. Sundays were not counted in the 40 days. Thus, the Wednesday, 46 days before Easter, came to be regarded as the beginning of Lent. In the early centuries, the season before Easter was also the usual period of intense training for new Christians. During this period, those learning what it meant to be Christians went through the final stages of preparation for baptism, which usually occurred at dawn on Easter Sunday. As the practice of infant baptism increased, the emphasis on Lent as a training period decreased. So that's a little bit of the history. If you dislike history as much as I do and you're bored to death, I apologize. My heart goes out to you. I do like some of this. I like history as it applies to Jesus. I don't care as much about it in terms of, I would guess the secular world. But there's a little bit of history there. I'm not going to go through all of this, but it goes through the 20th century, through the Catholic Church. This does talk a little bit about how what was considered Catholic or highly liturgical starts to become common for Protestants like us. Ministers and choirs donned vestments, books of prayer for use in the public services became common, most of them with forms of communion, which were adaptations of the historic liturgies. So more of the traditions came into our Protestant worship. Yeah, like I said, I'm probably not going to go through all of this. It's too much reading, and I don't want to bore you to death. I do want to look at some of the scriptures, though. Where is this coming from? Well, Matthew 4, 1 through 11, then Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. After fasting 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. And rather than reading all of this, I thought it might be more helpful, more engaging to see Bruce Marciano portray it in the Matthew video. So I've got a little clip of just these scriptures, and you'll notice in the corner each verse that's being read is notated in the bottom right, and Bruce is reenacting, in a sense, the temptation in the wilderness. So Larry, do we have sound ready? Okay, all right. So I'm going to turn this on for you.
Then Jesus was led by the Spirit into the desert to be tempted by the devil. After fasting 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. The tempter came to him and said, "If you are the Son of God, tell these stones to become bread." Jesus answered,
"It is written, man does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God."
Then the devil took him to the holy city and had him stand on the highest point of the temple. "If you are the Son of God," he said, "throw yourself down, for it is written, he will command his angels concerning you, and they will lift you up in their hands, so that you will not strike your foot against a stone." Jesus answered him,
"It is also written, do not put the Lord your God to the test."
Again the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. "All this I will give you," he said, "if you will bow down and worship me." Jesus said to him,
"Away from me, Satan! For it is written, worship the Lord your God, and serve him only."
Then the devil left him, and angels came and attended him.
It's kind of interesting when we see a portrayal of Jesus fasting and going without. It's an interesting reminder of how often, or actually how little, we go without. I mean, isn't it funny? If you get just the slightest hunger pang, it's like, I'm going to go check out the fridge. Maybe we have some leftovers. Or I'm going to go look in the pantry, or I'm going to find some chips or whatever. It's like just the slightest bit of hunger. It's like, oh, I'm going to take care of that problem. Or if we get this idea, I really could use a new blank. Well, then you don't even have to leave your desk or your phone. You can go order it and have it come right to you. And if you want to talk to somebody, it's just a bunch of gestures on your hand. I mean, with your phone has to be there, but I mean, well, that's for now. We might have phones built into our hands eventually. But I mean, you've got somebody instantly available to you. So we don't really go without very much, do we? And what does that breed but this sense of consumerism and, I would dare say, gluttony, where no matter what you want, it just can come to you instantly. We're not used to commanding our bodies or controlling our urges. It's like if you've got an urge, fill it. Whether that be food or drink or whatever, it's just go ahead and grab it. So Lent is a really interesting time to say, okay, I might do without something so that I can actually have some discipline back in my life, because it's not offered up on a platter. No one says to you, hey, would you like to do without today? No, it's all about what would you like to add to your life today? How can I put some more stuff into your storage bins? how can I give you more things for your house that you don't have space for? It's constantly accumulating and it's constantly satiating. However, if we do go without, well then, what does that look like? Well, Matthew 6 says, be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of the others to be seen by them. So there is this concept of, well, I'm doing without for Lent. It's like, oh, you're so righteous. You're so pious. You're so holy. What are you doing without? I'm going without Facebook. Must be terrible for you. And some people it would be. I mean, some people are on Facebook all the time, and I'm not bashing that. I'm just saying that there's a certain level of accustomed to whatever we like all the time. So how often do we go without? And if we do, what does that look like? So here's another clip from the Matthew videos that's relevant here.
Be careful not to do your acts of righteousness before men to be seen by them. If you do, you have no reward from your Father in heaven. So when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and on the streets, to be honored by men. I tell you the truth, they have received their reward in full. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. And when you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray, standing in the synagogues and on the street corners, to be seen by men. I tell you the truth, they have received their reward in full. But when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. And when you pray, do not keep on babbling like pagans, for they think they will be heard because of their many words. Do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask him.
You know, another one of our traditions is to think that we understand the way things were in these particular passages. We might object to the idea of, wow, I don't really see Jesus pouring water over someone's head, or I don't see him laughing and roughing up their hair. Well, it's funny because it doesn't say he did and it doesn't say he didn't. As a matter of fact, on a recent paper, I got called on my reading into the scripture because I was talking about how it seemed like the disciples were very attentive to Jesus' words. And the professor said, well, we don't know that. We're reading it in. It could be that they just didn't care what he was saying. The scriptures don't necessarily give us that level of detail. So if we object to that kind of a portrayal of Jesus as the jovial, fun, laughing kind of guy, it doesn't say he was and it doesn't say he wasn't. So for us to say, you know, well, he was probably pretty grumpy and was always really strict, well, we're reading that into the text. However, we know from Jesus constantly talking about love and calling people his brothers, he was probably pretty fun to hang around with, was probably a decent guy, and was probably very friendly. Therefore, I think that particular representation is more in line with the character of Christ, even if we don't see that kind of detail in there. But anyway, he was talking about not standing on the street corners and calling attention to ourselves. So that's why he says when you fast, don't look somber as the hypocrites do. And I won't bother with the lights this time. One last clip.
When you fast, do not look somber as the hypocrites do, for they disfigure their faces to show men they are fasting. I tell you the truth, they have received their reward in full. But when you fast, put oil on your head and wash your face, so that it will not be obvious to men that you are fasting, but only to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you.
If I were to stand here and say, you know what, we all need to fast, I'd be really uncomfortable pretty quickly because I know how much we love food. And I know that out of all the spiritual disciplines, saying fasting is important is kind of like saying, okay, you're going to have to start driving spikes through your fingernails. You know, it's just like, it's not our favorite, is it? If I say solitude, okay, I'm all over it. I'll go take a walk by myself. If I say prayer, then okay, I can pray. I'd like to pray without ceasing. If I say, well, you know, contemplation, meditation, any of those disciplines, well, those are cool. You don't really have to do without. But if I say we should fast, oh boy, here we go. I don't like that. Well, I was reading a commentary that said, is fasting commanded? Because in Matthew 6:16, Jesus said, when you fast, there is an assumption that it's already happening. He didn't say, I command you to fast. But he said, when you fast. So there's some kind of an assumption that at least the people in his time were fasting. But then it's interesting in Matthew 9:15, he says, can the wedding guests, he was being asked, why don't your disciples fast with you? And he says, can the wedding guests mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them? The days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and then they will fast. So he seems to be implying that Christians will fast after I've ascended. Again, it's not commanded, it's kind of assumed. And there's so much value to it. The central idea of fasting, this is from Richard Foster, is the voluntary denial of an otherwise normal function for the sake of intense spiritual activity. There's nothing wrong with any normal life functions. It's simply that there are times when we set them aside in order to concentrate. When we view fasting from this perspective, we can see its reasonableness as well as its broader dimensions. The Bible deals with fasting in regard to food, but we can take the central principle and apply it to other aspects of contemporary culture. So you could do a complete fast. You can go without food for maybe a day or so, or you can fast from other things. Fasting establishes a pattern of disciplining the body's desires long before we face the moment of decision. See spiritual disciplines being a way of kind of working out your spirit to be ready for an event that will tax you. Our human cravings and desires are like rivers. If not properly channeled, they tend to overflow their banks. Now the original monastic, think monasteries, the original monastic idea of chastity, for example, did not primarily focus on sexual sin, but on the right control of desire. Chastity meant the right control of all desires by the grace of God. This is where fasting is helpful because it dethrones the body as master and gives us authority over our body. We learn that cravings need not control us. So you're getting the idea of how this whole Lenten season, this whole giving up on something is good spiritual discipline because it teaches us who's really in control. A practical result is the discipline in one area, the practical result is that discipline in one area often produces results in several areas, as a 12-step program designed to help alcohol addicts proves useful for other destructive behavior patterns. The benefits of fasting extend to many areas of impulse control: pornography addiction, food cravings, internet obsessions, everyday activities such as shopping or television watching used to excess. The spiritual discipline of fasting teaches us not to repress desire, but to rechannel it properly. So if we were to take a cue from this tradition and say, okay, for the next 40 days or so, I'm going to do without something, the benefit being some kind of spiritual training so that we can actually focus on who's most important. Here are some modern ways of fasting from people, which would be the discipline of solitude. Now, this doesn't mean be rude to everyone and say, I'm sorry, I can't talk to you right now, I'm fasting from people. But sometimes we get so caught up in our social circles, we get so, I have to call this person, I have to call that person, I've got to tweet this person, I've got to text that person, and all of our social stuff gets in the way of actually spending alone time with God, alone time with the Word. Sometimes we actually have to fast from people a bit, because if we don't know how to be alone with God, we've missed our center and we're not going to be as good with people. We can fast from media, just get rid of news or radio or TV, blogs, newsletters, which is a little bit harder. Jesus went without food for 40 days, so I don't know if we're doing without TV is going to be that comparable. From the telephone, learn not to answer. Now that's just plain sacrilege. That's crazy. Who doesn't answer the phone? Well, some people will stop a prayer to answer the phone. It's like, well, if I'm talking to you face to face, I'm not going to say, hang on a second, I have a call that's more important to you, and I'm going to talk to the person on that phone call rather than talking to you. Unless I really think it's an emergency, there's no difference than talking to you and then talking to on a phone. It's like, well, I'm not going to interrupt that. So if we're praying to God, it's not like, hang on, God, I can come back to you. You're always there. I'm going to go answer the phone right now. It's a little rude, isn't it? We're just so used to answering the machine all the time. We could fast from texting and email or social media in some way. I know that often these are parts of our life, but what if we said, I'm not going to do that to excess anymore? What if I'm only going to do that when necessary? What about if we fast from acquiring and shopping and spending? I'm so used to just ordering things on Amazon that for me to not do that for 40 days would be like every day I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm not doing that. Why aren't I doing that? Time with God, okay. And that would be quite the reminder. I mean, even if it's just a little thing, it's like, oh, I want that pen, or no, I need a new mouse, or I need a new this or that, or something. It's just like, that gets to be a habit. From sweets or desserts, perish the thought. I'm meddling, yeah. From caffeine or alcohol, if you're going to do, heard a groan somewhere. If you're going to do that, you better wean yourself off. We don't just do caffeine cold turkey, or it's going to be really painful. Or maybe that's what you want. From more than enough food, maybe it's like, you know what, I'm only going to have one serving. And if you read the boxes, a serving is not what you think it is. A serving might be 12 potato chips, and you might think a serving is half a bag of potato chips. So, for more than enough. What if you only had one serving of food? Well, I'm going to have one serving of a bunch of different foods then. Now you can, adopt it to whatever makes sense for you. So what's the purpose of all this again? Why are we even talking about it? Well, time away from our habits and our indulgences reminds us of who's most important, that we can live without everything else. Really, when it comes down to it, on a desert island, if you're stranded, there's only one thing you need, and it's the presence of God. And if you die, well, He's still got you. But if you don't have God, well, maybe you live for a while, but what's the point in that? We tend to spend a lot of time and energy, or rather we make the time, for things that make us feel good, when that time is also available for communion with God. What we're saying is that fasting actually means freedom, and it's probably going to take a lot more than one sermon to drill that into our head, because fasting just sounds evil. It sounds like, I don't want to go without. How much has our culture crept into us? How much are we used to just getting and getting and getting, when Jesus invites us to go without, to give? So I would suggest, if you'd like to, if you think that it's beneficial, if you would kind of like a jump start on your spiritual walk, if you feel it would be helpful, then I'd say give up something for Lent. Not because you get brownie points with God, not because it saves you. We know that the work of Christ was finished. You were saved 2,000 years ago. It's not a matter of saying, you know what, I am going to really, St. Peter is going to put me in the express lane into heaven because I fasted. No. If we're serious about following Christ and developing that relationship, then going without in one way or another, as God leads you, can be very helpful. So will you pray with me? Father, we appreciate the reminders of how we can overcome the needs of this physical body. Not that it's evil. You created it to be a good thing. You declared it good. But Father, sometimes our physical needs rule our lives. And if it's your will, lead us to give up something in this Lent season. If it's something that you think would be good for us, help us to see how it's beneficial and help us to go ahead and do it. Otherwise, we know that there's no obligation, that you don't love us less, and that it's not a matter of making it into heaven, but rather our faith from you saves us. We're saved by faith, through faith, by faith. Father, we just thank you that that's secure, and we ask for your help as we develop a closer relationship with you by whatever means you have in mind. We pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. So speaking of tradition and speaking of liturgy, we do celebrate communion as a reminder of who Jesus was, what he did, what he is doing, what he continues to do, and what he will accomplish. We celebrate communion as a means of reminding ourselves of the body of Christ and his shed blood. We celebrate communion as a way to keep us mindful of that relationship. And it's a way of saying yes to his yes. When he said, yes, I am accepting you into heaven, and I'm giving my body and blood, then we are saying, yes, I accept your body and blood, and I continue to choose you again and again. So we partake of the elements together, and we do this in remembrance of him. So you're welcome to join us with communion. If you'll come up and take a cup and a piece of bread and then take it back to your seat, we'll partake together. The innermost circle on both trays is juice, and then the rest of them are wine on the outer rings. So feel free to take and bring back to your seat, and then we'll celebrate communion together.